All right, well, welcome everyone to our preschool and elementary school uh, video conference to kind of share an update where we're at with the extended closure and where we are going. So what we want to do today is to give you an update. Last week, you submitted a bunch of questions to us. We're going to go through and answer those questions for you that were submitted. You should have also received a live link where you can submit questions today. Some of my colleagues that are joining me today. We'll be sharing those and I'll be answering them throughout the session as well as some of our other colleagues. So we've planned out definitely a half hour. If it goes longer and you want to stick with us, that's great. So we want to get to as many questions as we can. If you need to come back later, don't forget we're streaming this. It'll be housed on our website moving forward, so you can come back at a later time and take a look at it. But really what we want to focus on today is, first of all, to give you an introduction as to where we're going on April 6th. So as you know, the governor closed down schools through May 1st, which means the first available opportunity we have to get back to school is May 4th. So as it's been shared in previous communications, starting on April 6th, we will move away from what we've done in the past few weeks of sharing educational opportunities and suggestions to a specific remote learning plan that students will participate in from preschool all the way on up to 12th grade. So when we talk about remote learning, what that means is that we are providing as educators, as teachers, communication to our families and to our students about educational activities you can participate in and engage in to continue learning going. If we look at our overall purpose during this closure is to support students' learning so that we can reduce gaps and students can be as prepared as they possibly can be for next school year. So we're going to go through in a little bit of detail what those look like at each level. If you're up on your email, about 10, 15 minutes ago, I sent an email detailing what these remote plans will look like by grade level, as well as our grading procedures. And I'm going to share my screen with you now. I'm going to pin that so you can see. What we've also done is we've put this on, all of this information is also going to be on our website. So on the district website, on every building page, under the shortcuts here on this side, you are going to see the top two consistent. So the first one is extended closure information. So if you want to review any communications I've sent out, they're all linked here. The one I just sent out will be linked later today with some topics that are addressed so you don't have to reread every email. So that's there for your use. And then the remote learning plans and resources. So if you click on this link, again, this is on our district site and every building page in the same spot. You can learn about what we're doing with the remote learning plans, what we're doing for resources to support. Hey, did I need to sign up for a Chromebook to get that? What about making paper copies if I don't have that capability to home or Wi-Fi? All of those resources are there. But if you scroll down, this is where we will house all of our remote learning plans for the district. So these links are not active right now. They'll be active on April 6th at about 8 a.m. in the morning. So make sure you check back here. This is the one spot as a parent, no matter how many buildings or grade levels your kids are in, this is where you're going to want to go to get the remote learning plans for your kids. So what I want to do is I want to provide a little overview of what remote learning looks like at each level and how you're going to access these. And a lot of this, again, if you miss some of what I'm saying, it's all in the email that was sent out to folks earlier today. So if I'm a preschool parent, you will see, I'm going to share my screen with everybody again. If I'm a preschool parent, you'll log in when that link's active and you'll see a sheet that looks somewhat like this. You'll see that it's got, instead of teacher, it's got different activities or different subject areas for the preschool. And then for the week of April 6th, you will see that we've linked all different stuff. So if I want to figure out what am I supposed to do for English language arts for the week of April 6th, all I would do is click on that link of spring syllables and it will give you the lesson plans or the remote learning plans for that week. If you can see at the bottom here, there are two tabs. This is a spreadsheet, so there'll be a tab for the classroom plans and the encore plans, so you'll be able to follow that. So just each week, we want you to follow along. As we suggested at the preschool level, probably no more than 1 hour a day should you be engaging in remote learning. But you as a parent can work and support your child in their learning, whether it's art, music, or PE, or classroom or content-based activities. They're all there for you to use and implement and support with your students. I'm going to turn it over to Erin now, who's going to give us, Erin Green, our Director of Curriculum, and she's going to talk through a little bit about what's going to happen with remote learning at the elementary level. Erin?
Thank you. Good afternoon. So we are doing, as Dr. Ryba shared, each grade level is going to have what's called a tic-tac-toe board. So we're trying to make it a little bit more engaging, give kids some choice. So when you click on the grade level of your child or children, what you're going to be linked to is a document or a sheet that will tell you 2 things to do each day. One of them is going to be reading, because we know continuing to read every day is probably the best thing that our kids can do. Or kids can do their Lexia minutes if they have access to the computer and that's something that they would like to do. Either one of those, you can switch it up each day or however that you want to do that. Those are going to be phenomenal for our students. We're also asking them to continue to practice math facts. And there's some linked resources, some fun ways to practice, some games. So it doesn't have to be just drilled with flashcards, but teachers are providing options. And then as I talked about the tic-tac-toe boards, there's one for language arts or our reading and writing, and there's one for math. And we're asking every child to complete the middle box, and then they can pick from that 2 other activities so they could make a tic-tac-toe. We also are going to have some some paper copies. Those will be placed on the buildings, the outside of each elementary school. So if you don't have internet access or you don't have a Chromebook or the capability to have your student on a Chromebook, we do have that option as well. We're looking between, an hour, maybe 2 hours a day for the remote learning at the grade school level. Of course, that's going to vary between the age of the child, but we're hoping to do some activities that aren't just sit at the computer. So we tried to have our teachers engage in a lot of just hands-on exploratory activities as well. Additionally, there are going to be some resources for our art, PE, music. Our counselors are going to have a link on there as well. And there's some things with social emotional. Your teachers will reach out if you have a student with an IEP or an English learner. If you have math enrichment and you're in our gifted intervention, there's going to be some options for that. And again, we just want to keep kids engaged the best we can during this remote learning opportunity.
Thanks, Erin. And, as I think as we go throughout this session today, I think there's some questions that were submitted from the slides on grading. So we'll talk about grading later. And if not, one of my colleagues will remind me to address how we're grading in preschool and elementary. And if you're a parent or community member that's watching and you have, or a parent and you have kids in middle school and high school, don't forget 3 o'clock, we'll do another session and we'll talk about remote learning for those levels at that time. So what I want to do is I'm going to share my screen with you again to kind of highlight some of the things that have been going on. So we talked about that we know that the schools have been closed. There's a lot of stuff that's been changed. There's been a bill that's been passed by the legislature detailing a lot of exceptions based on this school year because of the closure. So as you may have heard, all state testing has been canceled for the school year. If you have a child in 3rd grade, you've heard of something called the 3rd grade reading guarantee. No students will be retained based on the 3rd grade reading guarantee because that was canceled. Hopefully you've also seen in our previous communications that we're still providing breakfast and lunch services to those families in need. And those days and times are there. I know we have new families that are in need because of the closures and what we're all going through in terms of people having their hours reduced or losing their jobs. So if being able to obtain food for your children wasn't an issue prior to the closure, but is now, please reach out to me or our food service director. You can find his contact information on the website and we can work with you individually. As I shared in communications earlier, we have shut down our district playgrounds per the governor's order. And I made the decision to close our athletic fields at Packatan Stadium and the middle school field. due to too many individuals not following social distancing rules, playing team sports, et cetera. It's in the best interest of the district and our overall health of our community to close those fields at this time. And we'll reevaluate that on a week basis to see if we'll reopen them. And we talked about the website. So what we want to do is get into your questions, and we've kind of taken your questions and categorized them in a few different areas. So we're going to talk a little bit more about classwork and remote learning. What do student services look like? IEPs, 504 supports, technology. We'll get an update on with Chromebooks, and then building access building and facility access, fees, district calendar, events and extracurriculars, et cetera. We'll get into those questions throughout. So as we take a look at this first slide that you can see on your screen, what we've done is we've taken pretty much all the questions that you have submitted that pertain to preschool or elementary are good questions for the general group. And we've put them on a bunch of slides. We've highlighted the ones we're going to focus on today in green. If we didn't get to your question today, that doesn't mean we're not going to get to it. We're actually going to continue these weekly chats moving forward. So if you want to put on your calendar next Thursday at 1 p.m., we're going to do the same thing again. We'll take new questions and get to the questions that we may haven't answered yet. So as you can see, the first question that we want to address is, will there be a requirement to complete all online or district work? So as I shared with preschool, or Aaron shared about elementary school, in terms of the word requirement, I'm going to talk around that word because in a remote learning environment, it's not practical to say that every single assignment is going to be submitted. So what we are saying is we want to provide opportunities and learning opportunities for our kids so that they reduce those learning gaps and continue to build their skills and learn new knowledge so they're prepared for next year. So as you look at these learning opportunities, we want you to make the decisions that you feel are in the best interest of your child and your home situation. Everybody's different. We're dealing with thousands of kids and thousands of families, and we understand that not everybody has Wi-Fi, not everybody has the bandwidth. You may have one device at home and 3 kids. And so we understand all that. So we want you to do the best that you possibly can at home with the resources we have. Obviously, we're suggesting and encouraging everybody to participate in all the remote learning we've put into place. We've communicated with our teachers that we're not replicating school at the building at home. We've asked them to prioritize what are the most important standards or essential questions that still have to be addressed and focus our learning on those areas. And I think as we look at the plans we have, it offers flexibility, it offers choice, and gives you the opportunity to go above and beyond or do what we're suggesting would be a good foundational aspect to work on. As I said in my email, teachers may be requesting that you submit work, but that work that's going to be submitted is not going to be for a grade. We're not grading work during this time for elementary and preschool students, but it's to provide good descriptive feedback on how students are doing. And what we find in the educational world and education research is that good descriptive feedback is much more impactful and important in increasing and enhancing student learning than a letter grade or a N for needs improvement or S for meeting the standard, whatever it may be. So that's how we'll address that. Moving on to the next question, how will teachers get grades for report cards? How can I contact my teachers? Well, I think we've addressed, or you can read, in addition to how teachers are going to get grades for report cards, they're not unless we return. So if we don't return the rest of the school year, there will be no grades collected April 6th and beyond. If we do return, we'll have, on May 4th, we'll have about 7 weeks of instruction where kids would have actually been in the buildings, and we'll use that to give, depending on the grade level, assessment of the standards, and grades 3 through 5, letter grades as well. And how can I contact my teacher? In this setting, it's going to have to be through email. So we've told all of our teachers that they should be getting back to parents and students in a 24-hour time period. And your teacher, we've also required our teachers to schedule office hours. So our teachers will be communicating that with our students. That's not an opportunity. The purpose of that is not to provide direct instruction or teach a math lesson. Some teachers may do that. And they may use things like Google Hangout or something called Screencastify, where they could share a video of a lesson with you that students can take a look at. But the real focus is answering questions, supporting, guiding students in their learning. So teachers will be communicating with you when that is. That's when you know you've got direct access with the teacher. But other than that, you can use email to get a hold of them, and they will get back to you in a timely basis. Moving on to the next question that we want to address is work going to be live in a classroom situation or just videos and resources? So there is nothing going to be live that is going to be required for everybody. As I said, some teachers may choose to do that through those platforms. However, we're encouraging all of our teachers to do things that can be accessed at any time based on being cognizant of the needs and the family schedule that you may have at home. So what we're sharing, we all know YouTube, so we can do things, teachers can create YouTube channels or an app that we have called Screencastify does the same thing where they can share their screen, they can talk to you. And that way your child and you can sit down at any time of day and work through this in a time period that's convenient for you. So when we talk about remote learning, again, remote learning is we're providing educational focus and remote learning plans and resources to continue learning. Distance learning is what it would be considered a live learning environment where we're truly interacting and communicating and learning in a live online environment. And that's not what we or most schools are providing during this closure. So let's take a look at some other questions that we've got. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Faust, our communications coordinator, who is going to talk about question number 6. Dan.
Thanks, Dr. Ryba. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. Yeah, as Dr. Ryba mentioned earlier, there is going to be a centralized location for people to view the lessons, to go to for resources, and that, as mentioned before, is on our website. It's on the main page, and it's also on each individual school page. We've tried to remain consistent among the different individual web pages throughout our main site at strongnet.org. If you'll notice on the right-hand side of the screen, the shortcuts, the first 2 shortcuts are consistent among the different web pages. The first one will have information about the extended district closure, and we'll continue to update that throughout. The second shortcut goes right to those remote learning plans and resources that our teachers are working so diligently on, and really making it hopefully easy for you as parents to access those in order to provide those learning opportunities for our students during this closure.
Thank you, Dan. And now we're gonna ask Erin Green again to come back and talk to us. She's going to take a look at questions 9 and 11. So Erin, if you want to give us some updates on those 2 questions.
Absolutely. So we will have, as we talked about, paper copies posted on the front doors of each elementary building. So we say that they'll be there by Wednesdays of each week. We are pushing out lessons in 2-week increments. What that means is if you go on, the first week would be next week. If you go on Wednesday, April 8th, you'll have available for you there both the week, next week, and the following week. So you'll have a hard copy of each of the tic-tac-toe boards. We're also printing out some of the needed resources. So that middle square that I talked about, anything that your child needs to complete that without computer will be available. On the tic-tac-toe boards, there are some opportunities for students to do things beyond being on a computer. So you'll have that access because you'll have a copy of the board. We're also trying to be very cognizant of students being online too much. So a lot of our activities are going to involve things that maybe aren't online. We are going to be very flexible in what we're having kids do, how they're completing work. Maybe they're just writing it on a piece of notebook paper. They're still getting the same exposure, the same practice. It's just easier in an easier format because we know families do have different circumstances. One of the questions was, how much should I be helping? I'm working full time. This is really challenging. And we understand that. So that's why we're making these choices of the choice boards. We're making the accommodations to do some offline stuff. As we talked about the time, I wouldn't have them on for much more than an hour at the younger levels, or 2 hours at most on the actual computer on a day-to-day basis.
Question
And
11. Question 11, Erin, was, will there be activities or ideas for music, art, gym, social, emotional health?
yeah, so the teachers have been working really hard on those as well. They're going to push out ideas again on that same website that Dr. Ryba was showing. You'll be able to access that live starting Monday. And there are folders. There's ideas for music, art, gym. Those are optional, but I think those are great opportunities because our kids still need those type of experiences. They need their brain breaks. They need ways to keep busy that are still academic. Social emotional health, yes, we're incorporating that. A lot of the teachers wanted to put some of that into the board because this is hard. It's hard for everybody. It's hard for kids to process what's happening, and they need some of those experiences. The guidance counselors are also going to have a link on the webpage. So that is something that you as a parent can reach out. You can see what resources are available, or if you would need to contact a counselor, you can get their contact information there as well. So we're trying to cover all of the different avenues so a kid would have exposure to what they would have in a school day.
Thank you, Erin. We're going to ask Jenny Pelko, our Assistant Superintendent, to share her thoughts or an answer to question number 10 there, Jenny.
So obviously we're working in a very different time right now. And so the answer to this is no. Attendance will not be tracked or recorded right now. You don't have to let us know if your child is sick and can't complete work. And just to kind of go back to what Mrs. Green's talked about, it's going to be different for each individual family based on the amount of time your child spends working. And so if they're sick, let them be sick. If they need a break, let them have a break. Again, I think the direction is maybe an hour for a preschooler, 1 to 2 for an elementary student to be doing some remote learning. It's good for them to continue to learn and to use those tic-tac-toe boards to kind of help, break up the boredom maybe a little bit as well. But again, it's really dependent on you, your individual family, what you're doing, what resources you have, in your situation. So again, we don't want to cause any undue stress on families. We just want to be able to provide learning so that kids can continue with their growth.
Thanks, Jenny. At this time, I think that concludes the specific questions on remote learning. So Erin or the team, were there any questions that people submitted live regarding remote learning or those type of topics that we should address now?
Sure. There's one about, are kids actually progressing in their skills, or is it just more of a review? And I can address that one with regard to elementary and preschool. So these first 2 weeks, we wanted to get kids in the swing of things. So these first 2 weeks are review of skills. We want to make sure kids remember what they were learning, cover some of those important standards that they've already been taught. And then moving forward, we do plan to teach new content in a way that is accessible for all. So we are going to look at what's needed for that grade level. We're going to look at what was to be covered in trimester 3. And collaboratively, the grade level teachers are going to find ways that they can push that out to our students so that they're not behind moving forward. There's obviously, it's not going to replicate the exact school year, but we are working hard to make sure that students are progressing. They'll be ready for the next grade level. We won't have to spend a half of a year reviewing or redoing work. We want to make sure that, we're not halting their education. We're going to keep moving forward in a way, as Jenny just said, a way that's fair to everybody. Couple other questions. Kids miss seeing their classmates and their friends. Any suggestions on how to help with that, or ways in which, you can alleviate some of that anxiety or just the loneliness that they're feeling?
Well, and I can speak from first of all, from an adult's perspective of how difficult it is to be, kind of socially isolated from folks, especially with young kids. So Jenny, is there any suggestions that you have for parents or resources that you can direct them to in terms of that question?
Yeah, I know that the counselors were working on some of that. I know in some of the videos that the counselors were sharing and that we'll share with you, if you didn't get them through the newsletters, they'll be archived on the link that Erin talked about earlier. But they have some videos and some things that they're talking about, in regards to activities that kids can do to kind of connect with each other. I know in my neighborhood, it was one of our friend's son's birthdays. And so we organized a car parade, very socially isolated. I know we're not supposed to go far from home, but just drove by his house and honked. And that brought such a smile to his face. So there's lots of creative things out there. I know on Facebook, on Twitter, and the things that people are doing to connect. But it is a challenge, and anything that you can do to help kind of continue those relationships with your guidance is important for our kids.
And I would just add, we all have to look at what are different means that we can now communicate. Who would have thought that we'd communicate with our community via a live stream conversation like this? And it's something that I think we can continue to do when this is all over. But, looking with your kids, depending on their age, whether you use a FaceTime app or whether you use a Google Hangout, as long as there's some parental oversight and you can monitor what they're having, but at least being able to see their friends and talk to their friends, even in a virtual way, is a little bit of comfort in this time. Other questions, Erin?
Just a logistic question. When you had mentioned that there would be 7 more weeks of school potentially if we return May 4th, can you clarify that? Because
Sure.
Go ahead.
So what I was referring to in 7 more weeks, that is not 7 more weeks of school once we get back. That is trimester 3 started at the end of February. So if you look at when trimester 3 started, off of memory, I think we had 3 weeks in prior to the last day of March 12th. And if we would come back on May 4th, we'd have 4 weeks of school left. So those 3 prior plus 4 moving forward would be 7. And just to clearly state for the question, if it's out there, there is not a plan to extend the school year in any way. We are working within the rules that the state has adopted and with our Board of Education to count all of our remote learning as school days. And so there's not a plan to extend the school year beyond what would be May 29th for any of our kids.
Thank you. And just one more right now, unless we have more time.
Okay.
So how can teachers ensure that the kids are learning and growing? We say that we are, and how could they monitor that progress, or how do we intend to ensure that that's happening?
So ensuring is difficult in this setting, to be candid. But what we're going to do and what strategies we have in place to help support that and guide that it's being done the best that it possibly can is that feedback loop between the students and the teachers. So as we talked about in the email and was mentioned earlier, teachers are going to be looking for some submittal of work. We're going to use the teacher office hours to help support students that may have questions or may touch base with support. As you said, kids need that social connection. Our teachers are missing and craving that social connection and that educational connection with their students. And so they'll be looking at a variety of frameworks and formats to help make sure kids are engaging, kids are learning. And one of the things we talked with our teachers in a webinar earlier today was, if you have students in your class that you haven't heard from, or they're not connecting with you, or they're not jumping onto Google Meet or talking, then we want you to personally reach out to the parents and see what's going on and see how we can help support. So ensure means that we have some statistical certainty that everybody's progressing. What we have to look at is doing the best we can in this remote setting and understanding that our kids are resilient, our kids will be okay, and we will support them through this. And any gaps that are there because of this closure will be addressed in the next school year by our teachers.
Okay, and I want to reiterate, we are getting a lot of questions. So if you're not seeing or hearing your question answered, please know that it may be coming up in a later section. And we will continue to have these meets on a regular basis, as Dr. Riba will talk about. I do want to ask, this will come up in the technology session or section, but can you address why aren't we mandating Zoom or Google Hangouts like some of the other premier districts are doing?
So, two parts of that question. We're always going to do what we think is in the best interest of our kids and our parents and community. And so when you take a look at comparing to other districts, we make decisions based on what we need, maybe not what some other districts need for their students and their communities. So in terms of what we're using in Zoom and Google Hangouts, first of all, I would strongly discourage kids from using Zoom. If you've read in recent media releases, Zoom is easily being hacked with inappropriate content being posted on Zoom. So we've directed our staff that they're not are not recommended to use Zoom because of the hacking issues that they've had. In terms of Google Meet or Google Hangouts, there are laws that are out there that provide guidance and really prohibit students from the age of below 13 of using that platform. All school districts have kind of we have a need right now, and we need to work and have certain procedures in place to make sure it's safe for kids. But we are going to use that. Teachers are going to use that, but we are not mandating it. And what I ask all of our parents to recognize and see is beyond their current experience or their current family or their current home situation. I can say with pretty clear certainty that it's not matching every other home situation around the district. We have students or families that I've said that may not have Wi-Fi, that may not have bandwidth, that may not have more than one device. And so we're really exposing negative equity issues in our school district if we mandate that, hey, we're going to provide a third grade math lesson at 9 a.m. and everybody has to jump on and watch this lesson, and that's how we're going to provide our instruction. It's just not feasible or fair or equitable to all of our students because that can't be replicated across the district for all of our kids. And that's why we're saying it's an option for teachers. It's an option to enhance, but for our teachers to provide content that can be accessed at any time, videos that can be accessed at any time through the different platforms that we talked about.
Perfect, thank you.
So with that, what we are going to do is we're going to move on to some student service questions. And so Andy Trujillo, our Director of Student Services, is going to jump on the talk with us. And Andy, if you can address in your time 12, 13, and 15.
Sure. So number 12 is, while I understand that all students will be affected by regression, my concern is with students who have specialized instruction through an IEP or 504. Is the district considering different summer school and ESY qualifications to help these students who might not bounce back easily? So ESY, in case anybody doesn't know, stands for Extended School Year, which isn't the federal guidelines for special education, yet every state defines how that will be delivered. So it's not consistent throughout the country. And in Ohio, it's based on regression and recoupment. So to answer the question is that ESY services are defined in the IEP as to when the team will meet to review the data to determine whether or not a student with a disability requires ESY services. Okay. Number 13, my kid has an IEP service. Can it be done online? And yes, we are doing the best we can. Our special educators are working hard right now to provide remote learning. It's a new learning curve for them too, as they are not accustomed to this, but they are working very hard as we speak. And we'll be reaching out to every parent of a child with a disability to partner with you as the parent to try to bridge that gap and say, what is going to be the best we can do to support your child during this time? Of course, we can't replicate the day, and the services may not look the same, but it's more of how do we collaborate with the parent and partner with you to do the best we can during this time. And number 14, number 15.
Number 15, my child is on a 504 plan. How will learning differ How will potential learning from home affect a 504?
Well, for Section 504 accommodations will be implemented during remote learning. For example, if your child has extended time on a 504, they should be awarded that extended time for classwork and tests. So those would be still honored through remote learning.
Thank you, Andy. Jenny, if you can jump back on and talk about kindergarten registration and question 16 there.
Sure. So this has been a question. Obviously, right when we closed, we were planning on getting all of our students registered, our half-day students and everybody registered for kindergarten. And so we just discussed this yesterday, and we are going to be working on a new plan to ensure that we get everybody registered for kindergarten. Obviously, that plays a huge role into our planning for staffing and everything for next year. So that's going to be really important for us to get to, and hopefully we'll have some answers for you very soon, within the next week, hopefully. Again, when will we know building assignments for full day kindergarten? Again, that all plays into getting everybody registered and going. And so we're hoping that we will be able to share that as well, because I know that plays into some decisions that you have as families as you move forward. Are there new deadlines for full day payments and commitments? We're working with our treasurer's office. Obviously, this is uncharted times. We recognize that there can be changes in families due to unemployment right now and everything going on. And so we want to work with you to ensure that if you still want full day, that you have that option. If you choose half day, that is fine as well. But if you have any questions on payment plans or anything like that, we will be working with you. But Dawn Evangelista in our treasurer's office is the person you'd want to contact if there's a change to that. But right now, we're going to stick with what we have, but we'll be communicating any changes soon if we do change that for you.
Thank you, Jenny. I think we're going to go back to Andy now. Andy, if you can take a look at questions 18 and 19 and answer that for our parents.
Absolutely. The question is, how will FAPE be affected? For anybody out there who does not know what FAPE is, that's a free appropriate public education. For our students with disabilities, the Ohio Department of Education is really stressing flexibility in meeting the needs of our students during this time. And what they're defining to be FAPE right now during this time is a good faith effort to meet FAPE for students. And this good faith effort is obviously through alternative means, whether it's virtually or by telephone. As I said before, working with parents collaboratively through that communication piece of email and telephone is key. But again, FAPE is really right now through a good faith effort with collaboration between parents and school district. Number 19, how will an ETR that is due in April be handled? What about an IEP? How will formal assessments be completed to use for guiding the IEP and ETR? These meetings will be conducted remotely. So if you have a meeting, whether it's an ETR or IEP, our staff have specific directions on how to do that, and we'll reach out to you to plan for that meeting. So we're doing those by phone or by Google Meet. If you have any other dates that you feel you already have scheduled, those should still happen. And anytime you want to have an IEP meeting, as a parent, you have a right to call that meeting, and you would just contact your special education teacher and say, I have some needs, I have some questions that I would like to address to the IEP team, and we can make sure that happens. In terms of an ETR that might require one-on-one testing, if there's any testing that's needed to complete a quality evaluation, that's going to have to be delayed until school resumes, and we would communicate that to you.
Andy, one additional question. It says, my student has autism and receives therapies throughout the year. What are we doing to ensure my child receives the education and therapy he vitally needs?
Sure. I apologize for missing that one. Case managers and related service personnel will reach out to parents personally. We do have some students with autism who receive some specialized services, and those related service personnel will reach out to parents to see whether or not teletherapy or remote learning would be effective for their child. So again, it really is going to be a partnership between all the special education staff making a personal contact with the parent.
And before we move on to, I think technology is coming up next. Aaron, any questions on student services that we should talk about now?
Andy, can you just address, are there intervention specialists and the gen ed teachers? Is there data collection happening? Are they monitoring progress? How does that look in this time?
Yes, it's a great question that's got everybody kind of thinking hard, if I could say it that way, across the state, because it's going to look very different than it typically looks. It's not going to look the same as if when we're in school. To answer the question, it's yes, there will be some data collection, but it's going to be a little different, meaning that it might not be to the extent we're used to when in a school setting. So intervention specialists and other related personnel will keep as much documentation as they can in terms of what services are being provided, what materials were offered to students, what opportunities were offered, what obstacles were met, and did the parent and the special education teacher problem solve what those obstacles were. So we're going to keep the data to the best of our ability so that when this whole school closure is over, we have a good sense, best to our ability, of where students' learning is.
Any other questions, Aaron?
No, not at this time.
All right. Well, I think next up is some technology questions. So our Director of Instructional Technology, Dave Binkley, will take 20 and 21, Dave.
So it says, will our kids be able to get their Chromebooks? I have 2 kids who would need them and would like to, and we have limited resources at home for them to work online. So I would like both of them to have their Chromebooks in order to keep the focused learning needed during this time. Quick answer this, yes, they will receive Chromebooks. Will they receive their Chromebooks? Maybe, maybe not, depending where they're at in line. But we did have a form sent out to everybody in the district that they could request a Chromebook. The original deadline was yesterday, and it was extended till earlier this morning, so we reached the limit of Chromebooks that we had originally had set up for our distribution tomorrow. Next week, we will be sending out another invitation to parents who were not able to request a Chromebook at this time, and they can actually request a Chromebook next week, and they will be given a scheduled time to come in and pick up a Chromebook for their child. And 21, will my 2nd grader need a Chromebook? She has a Kindle Fire tablet and a laptop at home. Does it have to be a Strong-Soul Chromebook to do the work? Let's break this down and answer the last question first. Does it have to be a Strong-Soul Chromebook to do the work? And the answer to that is no. Any device that has internet access, preferably with a Chrome browser, can be used. You have to use their student login account, so it's their scsmustangs.org account for them to be able to log in to access all of their information and documents, but that does not have to be a Strong-Soul Chromebook. So the middle question was, she has a Kindle Fire tablet and a laptop at home. The Kindle Fire tablet, I would say, would probably be a little difficult, as within any tablet situation would be, because they might need a full functioning keyboard, or some of the programs or functionality may not be there in a touchscreen tablet, but a laptop is perfectly fine.
And then Aaron, do you want to jump in and talk about 2nd graders and maybe the elementary tic-tac-toe boards, about what kind of technology will be needed in that setting?
Sure, I would echo what Dave just said. If there is internet access, they should be good. We've tried to create lots of different options for students. So even if maybe just a parent has a phone in the household and can pull up the board, from there, the work can be done as well. So internet, that's the most essential piece if you're doing the online component.
Thank you, Aaron. Continuing on to our next set of questions, in terms of building and facility access. Steve, if you want to take question 25 in terms of what we're doing to possibly get folks back in the building to get access to their materials.
Sure. The question as it reads is, how are you going to ensure that the students required to go back to school and retrieve their books or belongings will not come in contact with other students? and be safe? And then can you send out a detailed explanation of the process that you will use? The answer is yes, we will be sending out a detailed explanation of the process that we're going to use. I can tell you that we're looking at having different times for different students and parents to come into buildings, to be in the building so that we can stay safe and the social distancing as it's been outlined by state and federal mandates. The only thing missing on that plan right now is the effective date of the plan. That will depend on when the governor lifts the ban as it is in place now. So while we do have a plan in place, as we're developing a plan and working through that plan internally to make sure that we were covering all angles, the most essential piece of that plan, which is the date, has not yet been determined because we do not know when the governor is going to lift the restrictions that have been placed on the district to get those items. So when the governor lifts the restrictions and when we feel like we have enough time to get the message out, we will be getting that out and getting students and parents and staff in a stratified form into the building so they can get their possessions.
Thank you, Steve. Jenny, you want to talk about question 26 about picking up medications, EpiPens, inhalers, et cetera?
Sure. Right before, that Friday that we were still open, many parents picked up essential medications that they needed to get. I checked in with our school nurse, and like this question says, that there are some medications, EpiPens, inhalers that are still within our school buildings. I would say that for now, as Steve just talked about, until that order is lifted, we'll keep those safe for you. But if there is something that you need that is there and you need access to it, I would suggest contacting your building principal, who can then in turn work with our nurse to get a time to get that if that is essential. But right now we're just going to hang on to those leftover items. There's not many and we'll keep them there until we are officially allowed to get back in our buildings.
Thank you, Jenny. And then the last question that was there is, what if kids don't come back this school year? How will they turn in their textbooks and get things from their desk? Obviously, that's a plan that we'll be able to put in place if that's the case at a later date. When we look at these decisions, that's a great question, but just so you know kind of how we're processing this, when we're looking at the number of decisions and how we have to fundamentally change how we operate as an organization, we're chunking this off into groups of time. We took, the first 3 weeks and chunked that into a period of time. And now we're looking at what are all the key decisions and things that we need to put in place and systems we need to put in place between now and May 1st to address the closure. If we hear in the coming weeks that the governor is going to shut us down for the rest of the year, similarly to what Steve shared, we'll put together a plan based on the restrictions that are in place at a state level in terms of social distancing and mass gatherings to make that work. But you will have an opportunity to get back into the classrooms, to get all of the materials that you would need at the end of a traditional school year. So Aaron, at this time, we talked about technology and facility access. Are there any follow-up questions from our viewers on those topics?
Well, Cameron, can you reiterate again you talked a little bit about the school year. Are we looking at shortening next year's school year, getting rid of holidays? What's the latest that you would allow school to, say we get an order from the governor that we can go back the 15th of May? Would we do that? Is the school year going to start earlier? Are we going to go later? Can you go through that just one more time, please?
Absolutely. So at this point in time, there is no plan to deviate from the school approved calendar. So if you go on our district website and look for district calendars, they're there. So we're not looking at extending the school year beyond May 29th. Whenever the governor says that schools are open, we are going to reopen as long as it's a school day already built into our calendar. So I think, Aaron, you said May 15th. So if the governor says, okay, public schools in Ohio can be opened up as of May 15th, even if it's 14 days left, we are going to give that, we are going to open up and give that option to parents. We understand if that's a scenario we're working through, that parents may have some reservations about sending their kids in the last few days with the health concerns that are out there currently. And we've worked with our parents on sending messaging out at that point. But we're not looking at extending the school year. Whenever schools are opened by the governor, this is not my decision, this is the governor's decision. We will reopen schools. And please know that there's only specific reasons that I can close schools down. So if the governor has said schools are good to be open, I'd have to look within that criteria to see, but we would oblige with the governor's order. And then if the models of flattening the curve and coronavirus continue to play out, and by summertime we're in a better spot, the only reason we would delay the start of the 2020-21 school year is if the governor kept us closed down. Other than that, we're planning on being ready and opening as our district calendar schedule states.
Great. Can we jump back to Andy with an IEP question? Do IEPs need to be revised since it looks different now with instruction? So the number of hours and least restrictive environment, what is that going to look like?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a very logical question that was circulated a couple of weeks ago around the state. And the final landing spot was that the answer would be no, that student needs drive the IEP, not a national emergency like what's happening now. That right now it's just through a good faith effort between both parties for the best outcome for the student. But we would not change IEPs because of the current school closure.
Thanks. And then two more that I think I can tackle.
Okay.
One is about full day kindergarten, and what are those students that, parents paid for the full day? How is that experience looking different for them? And the answer to that is we're posting what we talked about with the tic-tac-toe boards. Teachers are also able and very willing to provide additional resources and additional work, keeping in mind, it's all optional, but we do want to continue to build that education. So you may see things coming from your child's teacher that are above and beyond what is shown on the website. Again, just to reiterate, the e-learning platform is going to be right on our strongnet.org website, and that will be available starting Monday at 8 a.m. Additionally, with interventions, we will have, if your child was working with Title I per se, those teachers are reaching out to all of the kids on their caseload. Same with our English learner students. I know that they have some activities that they're working with and touching base with the students as well. So we are continuing to provide our differentiation as much as feasibly possible in this time. Teachers have a good handle on scaffolding and what needs to happen. And so I'm really pleased with the work that they're putting into designing these lessons and making them accessible, providing enrichments for those that need it, and trying to do not just a one-size-fits-all education, the best that we can in this unique circumstance.
All right, thank you, Aaron, for adding that. What we're going to do is we're going to continue to go on, and I think our treasurer, George Anagnostou, is going to be up next. Got a handful of questions here for you, George, about tuition, fees, all of that type of stuff. So if you want to tackle some of those for our parents.
Thank you, Dr. Iba. And hello, everyone. I hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. First question 28. My student is at the preschool at Lund Road. If we don't have school for the remainder of the school year, will we still be responsible for the tuition? As of now, Mrs. Surso should have communicated the week of March 12th or the following week when we went on the shutdown. She should have communicated to families that the preschool tuition was put on hold as of the March 20th at due date on the 20th of each month until schools are open. If we're closed for the remainder of the school year, we will need to provide a recommendation to the board to address the tuition, along with the preschool tuition, along with all the fees and kindergarten tuition as well. We just need to go to that May 1st deadline just to see what happens, so we can provide one recommendation. We know it's something that we need to address, but we just need to see what plays out if schools go back in session May 1st or if it's a prolonged closure. Leading into question 29, what happens to all the school fees we're required to pay for the whole school year? Will we be reimbursed for will we be reimbursed the remainder since the closure will be possibly extended? Um, same concept. We'll need to wait till May 1st to see what happens with the school closure. And then during that time, we'll also need to look at all the types of fees to see what wasn't used, what can be prorated. For example, such workbooks, those have already been used for the majority, but there might be other fees that we could potentially prorate. We'll just need to make a recommendation to the board, as the board will ultimately have to vote on our recommendation since they initially levied the fees. Question 30, are teachers posting grades or regarding power schools? Will you open up power schools even if fees are not paid? As of this morning, we have opened up power schools to everybody due to the circumstances. And question 31, will full day kindergarten tuition be partially reimbursed? Same with the preschool tuition. We'll just need to wait and see what happens May 1st so we can make a one decision and see how what school looks like and instruction looks like beyond May 1st. Any
Thank
other
you,
questions?
George. I think that as George shared with everybody, when we take a look at fees, the fee structure, board, as he said, the board approves fees. So once we get clarity on what the rest of the school year will look like, if there will be a rest of the school year, then we'll be in conversation with the Board of Education to talk about fees, tuition, all of those things, pay to participate. So we will have a conversation. It is on our radar, but no decisions will be made until we have a final verdict on whether or not we'll be returning the rest of the school year. I do have one more question that we're going to talk about today, and then Aaron, we can open it up to any others that you think we need to hit on. Don't forget, we're going to come back next Thursday, same time, to address more questions that you submitted today or ones we didn't get to that you submitted prior. So the last question is, how will the school closure impact the end of the school year, summer break, and the start of next school year? So I think we've already addressed that one just recently, that it's not going to impact it based on the information that we have right now. So Aaron, anything else on your end that we want to talk about today?
Can you just reiterate about the email that you recently sent out with grading?
Yeah, so two points on that. Everybody that's a parent, if you put your email in our system accurately, this would be every fall when you do your typical beginning of the year forms, you should be getting my email. But if not, send me an email and we'll get you linked on, or you may have unsubscribed by accident, because who would ever unsubscribe from my wonderful emails that I send out? But if you did accidentally, we can get you logged back in. But as you take a look, the email is long. There's a lot of information in there, but really just focus on the different sections based on the age of your students. So it's broken down between preschool, elementary, middle, and high school. And it will give you specific information in two areas. What does remote learning look like? It'll show you the screenshots like I showed you at the beginning in terms of kind of what it will look like, how you'll interact with it. And then secondly, what will grading look like at that level? So that's in your inbox. It was sent probably a little bit before 1 o'clock. So take a look, and that should give you some additional clarity on what this is going to look like moving forward.
Okay, and that wraps up the questions that were submitted.
All right, well, we greatly appreciate you tuning in. The website where you got the streaming or wherever you got logged in to see our streaming today, that will be there permanently. So as you want to share with family or friends that maybe weren't able to join us, please let them know. And we greatly appreciate your support, your understanding as we go through these next few weeks. Please be patient with us. Please be understanding that this is new territory for all of us. And I can tell you with the utmost certainty that every administrator, every teacher, every staff member in the Board of Education are working extremely hard to make this as seamless and smooth as possible. But as we told our teachers to keep in mind and staff, and I'm reminding all of our parents, please do what's in the best interest of our kids. Don't overwhelm them. We understand that there's a lot more going on that's impacting all of us right now than school. We will do everything we can to make sure we reduce those gaps and support our kids once we get them back at school. so that they're ready for the next grade level. And we can't wait for that day to get everybody back and get school as we know it going again. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to chatting with everybody next week.